The harsh reality is this: life has never been balanced, and it never will be. To believe otherwise is to live inside a comforting lie. Recognizing this isn't about falling into despair, it's about embracing clarity. The first step toward resilience, influence, and lasting achievement is to accept that fairness is not the invisible hand guiding outcomes. For centuries, people have been fed the story that hard work guarantees success, that honesty always prevails, and that justice will inevitably reward virtue. But if you look carefully at the world around you, does that narrative hold true? Do the most deserving always end up on top? Do those who sacrifice the most always get recognition? Or do you more often see advancement go to those who understand how to maneuver in reality, rather than those who cling to ideals? Since childhood, many of us were raised on a philosophy that says, do the right thing, follow the rules, work hard, and life will take care of you. Yet, as adults, we watch in frustration as people who bend rules or leverage relationships leapfrog over others who may be more skilled, more diligent, or even more ethical. The gap between what we were taught and what we observe creates bitterness. It eats away at motivation. It convinces people that they are powerless, waiting for recognition that may never come. This isn't just disappointing, it's debilitating. Here is where Niccolo Machiavelli's insights remain timeless. Unlike idealists who imagined how humanity should behave, Machiavelli described how people actually function in the raw competition of society. He analyzed power, not morality. He saw human beings as they are, not as they are painted in fairy tales. He once remarked that men are often ungrateful, unpredictable, and self-serving. He wasn't encouraging cruelty. He was shining a light on the patterns of human behavior that repeat across generations. To understand these truths isn't cynicism, it's awareness. When you strip away illusions, you gain clarity, and clarity allows you to act with strength. The belief in fairness, by contrast, plants weakness deep inside you. It makes you passive, always waiting for the outside world to hand you justice. It turns you into a beggar of recognition rather than an architect of undeniable value. And when life doesn't play by your imagined rules, you collapse into resentment. A better approach, the one Machiavelli pointed toward, is to recognize reality and position yourself strategically within it. This isn't about abandoning ethics. It's about not confusing ethics with guaranteed rewards. So here's the first mental shift you must embrace. Stop asking, why isn't life fair to me? Instead, start asking, how can I win despite life's unfairness? That question changes everything because fairness is a luxury. Strength is a necessity. Those who rise don't do so because life was kind. They rise because they built capability, developed strategy, and refused to let injustice paralyze them. Fairness is a beautiful illusion that traps you. The idea of fairness is seductive. It offers emotional comfort by promising that good behavior will always be acknowledged, that effort is enough, that morality is rewarded. But the cost of clinging to this belief is dependence. You become chained to outside validation instead of inner capability. Psychologists call this an external locus of control, a mindset where you believe outcomes are determined mostly by how others treat you, rather than by your own deliberate actions. Think about how this looks in real life. You pour your energy into a project and expect applause, only to watch someone else take credit. You obey every guideline and expect a promotion, only to see it handed to someone with better connections. You deliver the highest quality service, yet customers flock to cheaper, more convenient options. If your belief system rests on fairness, these moments feel devastating. You become disheartened, resentful, even paralyzed. But Machiavelli saw this vulnerability clearly. He noted that those who trust too much in human goodness often become the easiest prey. If you walk into the world expecting fairness, you make yourself predictable and therefore exploitable. The opportunist, the strategist, the manipulator, they thrive precisely because others cling to illusions. Depending on fairness weakens you in three major ways. First, it makes your emotions volatile. You're always riding the highs and lows of how others treat you. Second, it fills you with resentment when outcomes don't align with your expectations, clouding your judgment. Third, it breeds passivity, where you sit still, waiting for recognition instead of building results so strong they can't be ignored. Does this mean you should discard ethics? Not at all. Ethics still matter, but they should be pursued because they help you build trust, relationships, and integrity, not because you expect them to guarantee a reward. In other words, be ethical, but don't be naive. Operate with both moral clarity and strategic awareness. The real alternative to fairness dependence is capability dependence. Instead of waiting for others to reward you, you make yourself impossible to overlook by building undeniable skills, forming powerful relationships, and mastering strategy. Instead of wishing for fairness, you develop the tools to thrive even when others bend rules. That shift from fairness will save me to capability will protect me is the turning point of personal power. Human nature is the blueprint of strategy. Most people make decisions based on how they wish others would behave, not on how people actually behave. They assume loyalty is permanent, gratitude is lasting, and fairness is universal. But history shows otherwise. Gratitude fades quickly. Loyalty wavers when tested. Fairness collapses when self-interest is at stake. Machiavelli's analysis of human nature was never about promoting cruelty. It was about acknowledging tendencies that reappear across time. People aren't always selfish, but selfishness is always possible. People aren't always dishonest, but dishonesty often arises when the stakes are high. To ignore these tendencies is to walk blind into danger. Understanding human nature doesn't mean assuming the worst. It means preparing for the full range of possibilities. For example, people are far more likely to stay honest when honesty is rewarded and dishonesty is punished. They're more likely to stay loyal when loyalty benefits them and betrayal costs them. They're more likely to behave fairly when fairness aligns with their self-interest. This means you can't just hope people will behave well. You must design environments where good behavior is encouraged and bad behavior has consequences. That's not manipulation. It's intelligent structure. When you learn to observe these patterns, you gain strategic advantage. You can anticipate when someone's loyalty might waver, when competition may erupt, or when alliances may collapse. This foresight lets you prepare rather than react. It positions you to lead rather than stumble. And here's a deeper truth. Understanding human nature isn't just useful for defending against deceit. It can also strengthen your relationships. When you recognize someone's fears, desires, and motivations, you can communicate in ways that resonate. You can offer solutions that truly align with their self-interest while still serving your goals. That's not exploitation, it's mastery of alignment. To build this wisdom, you must study psychology, history, and social behavior. But more importantly, you must observe people closely in everyday life. Notice how they react when pressured, tempted, or given opportunities. Over time, you'll see patterns emerge, and those patterns will guide you in navigating the complexities of power, business, and relationships. Complaining about unfairness makes you weak. One of the most self-destructive habits is complaining about unfairness. When you broadcast how unjustly you've been treated, you send a clear signal to the world. I see myself as powerless. That perception, both in your own mind and in the minds of others, weakens you immediately. Complaining provides short-term relief. It can make you feel validated, even comforted, but the long-term cost is steep. People rarely respect chronic complainers. At best, they offer shallow sympathy. At worst, they see your bitterness as weakness, which invites further exploitation. And inside yourself, each complaint reinforces a victim mindset, chaining you to helplessness. Strong individuals don't waste energy lamenting unfairness. Instead, they analyze. They ask, what can I learn from this? How do I shield myself from it happening again? What new skill or strategy can I develop so I'm less vulnerable next time? Those questions turn setbacks into training grounds. Complaining turns setbacks into prisons. By refusing to complain, you cultivate resilience. You show others and yourself that you won't crumble when mistreated. Instead, you adapt, reposition, and return stronger. This mindset transforms unfairness from an obstacle into fuel. Final insight. Fairness is a dream that weakens you if you treat it as a law of the universe. Strength is what frees you from depending on it. Machiavelli's wisdom isn't about becoming cold or ruthless. It's about becoming realistic, capable, and prepared. By shifting from fairness dependence to capability dependence, by studying human nature instead of clinging to illusions, and by refusing to complain when wrong, you develop a kind of strength that very few people ever master. So next time life treats you unfairly, don't waste time asking, why me? Instead ask, how can I succeed anyway? That question will put you on the path not of resentment, but of power. And once you embrace this path, unfairness stops being a chain and becomes just another obstacle you are fully equipped to overcome. Complaining about unfair treatment may feel justified in the moment, but in practice, it rarely strengthens you, it weakens you. The very act of voicing constant grievances tells the world you see yourself as powerless. Instead of presenting yourself as someone capable of changing outcomes, you present yourself as a victim of circumstances. This perception alone can alter how people treat you. When others notice that you habitually complain, they may not sympathize, they may exploit. Some will consciously test your boundaries further, while others, even without intent, will sense that you are easy to overlook or disregard. Niccolo Machiavelli once noted that minor offenses invite revenge, while severe, indecisive actions prevent retaliation entirely. His point is clear. When your response to injustice is small, weak, and repetitive, it makes you appear fragile. When your response is measured, deliberate, and strong, it earns respect. Constant complaining about trivial injustices doesn't protect you, it exposes you. Every complaint you vocalize etches itself deeper into your mindset. Neurologically, you reinforce the pathways of weakness, helplessness, and external blame. Over time, this creates an identity built around victimhood. You begin to believe your fate rests in the hands of others. This erodes the ability to think strategically, to act decisively, and to strengthen your own position. Complaining also misdirects your most valuable resources: time, focus, and energy. Instead of investing these in building new skills, creating opportunities, or strengthening your resilience, you squander them dwelling on the unfairness of others' actions. The truth is, you cannot control another person's behavior, but you can always control your response. When you center your attention on injustice instead of capability, you starve your own growth. The superior alternative is what I call strategic response. Instead of venting, you analyze. Instead of repeating grievances, you adapt. Strategic response asks, why did this happen? What patterns are at play? What can I learn about these people, this environment, or myself? Strategic response doesn't seek comfort, it seeks leverage. It's not about demanding fairness, it's about shifting tactics so you cannot be easily disadvantaged again. This requires emotional regulation, the ability to feel anger, disappointment, or frustration without allowing those emotions to dictate reckless action. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions. It means refining them into fuel for careful thought and constructive change. Anger can paralyze you, but it can also sharpen your focus if directed properly. Think about the difference in questions. Someone stuck in a complaining mindset asks, why is this happening to me? Why can't people be fair? But someone thinking strategically asks, what is this teaching me about power dynamics? How can I make sure this doesn't repeat? What capabilities do I lack right now? And how can I acquire them? This subtle but profound shift from complaint focused thinking to solution oriented analysis builds both resilience and effectiveness. Each time you face an unfair moment and respond with strategy instead of emotional venting, you become stronger. Over time, others stop seeing you as someone easily wronged and begin seeing you as someone difficult to weaken. This doesn't mean you should never confront unfairness directly. At times, confrontation is essential, but the difference lies in how you respond. Complaining is an emotional outburst without a plan. Assertive communication, by contrast, is clear, purposeful, and directed at real outcomes. Instead of whining that something isn't fair, you calmly outline the behavior, demonstrate its impact, and propose specific solutions or boundaries. The former reduces respect, the latter commands it. Assertiveness is strength disguised as clarity. It avoids self-pity while still addressing the issue. This distinction becomes especially critical in professional environments. In workplaces, frequent complaints rarely improve your situation. They diminish how others perceive your competence. A colleague or manager who constantly hears grievances about unfair treatment doesn't think, this person is noble and principled. They think, this person lacks perspective, cannot handle difficulty, and needs supervision. Whether justified or not, this perception closes doors. Advancement flows to those seen as problem solvers, not problem broadcasters. Complaining may ease your emotions for a few minutes, but it costs you opportunities for years. Building the habit of strategic response instead of habitual complaint requires deliberate practice. The next time you feel wrong, resist the urge to immediately voice it aloud. Pause. Write the details down privately and treat the incident as data. Ask yourself, what triggered this? What patterns do I notice? What capability would make me less exposed to this in the future? How can I act differently so that this scenario either benefits me or never repeats? With this method, unfair experiences transform from emotional burdens into practical lessons. You replace helplessness with agency. This doesn't mean ignoring systemic injustice or excusing genuinely destructive behavior. It means learning to choose your battles carefully. Not every slight deserves a war. Not every offense requires energy. Complaining about every small unfairness leaves you exhausted and ignored. Strategically responding to the significant injustices, those that truly affect your future, makes your responses more powerful and more respected. You become someone who picks their moments, someone who responds with intelligence rather than impulse. Here's a challenge. For the next week, whenever you feel the urge to complain, stop. Write it down privately instead. Then ask 3 questions. What is this teaching me? What strength do I need to prevent this in the future? How can I respond in a way that improves my position rather than diminishes it? If you practice this, you'll notice your perspective shifting. Complaints will transform into insights. Frustrations will become lessons. And slowly, you'll stop appearing weak and start radiating strength. Remember this truth. Complaining signals fragility, but strategic response builds unshakable resilience. This leads us to another essential principle. Real personal power doesn't come from entitlement. It comes from competence. Many people believe they deserve success because they've worked hard, followed rules, or behaved ethically. While effort and morality are admirable, entitlement thinking creates dependency. It assumes others will notice your effort, reward your loyalty, or acknowledge your worth. But what happens when they don't? Entitlement collapses. Competence, however, endures. Competence is the ability to solve problems, deliver results, and create value regardless of whether recognition comes. It makes you less reliant on others' validation because your capability speaks louder than their judgment. Think of 2 employees. One believes he should be promoted because he's been with the company for 5 years. Another builds undeniable skills, forms valuable relationships, and delivers results that no one can ignore. If both are overlooked for promotion, the entitled one blames unfairness and seeks sympathy. The competent one asks, what do I need to add to my arsenal so this oversight never happens again? Guess which one will eventually rise? Machiavelli warned that relying on the goodwill of others is unstable, like building on mud. Genuine power is built on the solid ground of demonstrated ability. Competence grows through deliberate practice and continuous learning. You must constantly ask, what problems exist in my field? What solutions are people desperate for? What skills are scarce but valuable? Then you dedicate yourself to mastering those. The world cannot easily discard someone who brings irreplaceable value. Over time, each skill, each problem solved, compounds into a reputation. That reputation creates opportunities, which in turn allow you to grow further. This is how true power compounds, through a feedback loop of value creation. But competence isn't only technical. It also includes emotional intelligence, the ability to manage your own emotions and influence others constructively. It includes social intelligence, knowing how to build alliances, negotiate interests, and navigate human dynamics. It includes systems thinking, building structures and processes that consistently produce results rather than relying on luck. And perhaps most importantly, competence includes intellectual humility, the recognition that you always have more to learn. Entitlement says, I've done enough. Competence says, I can always become stronger. Relationships built from competence are sturdier than those built on entitlement. When you help others succeed because of your skills, you create bonds based on mutual value, not pity or shared grievances. Likewise, leadership earned through competence lasts longer than authority demanded through entitlement. People follow those who consistently deliver solutions, not those who insist they deserve to be followed. So here's your takeaway. Entitlement makes you dependent. Competence makes you undeniable. Choose which kind of power you want to build. Ask yourself today, what one capability could I start developing that would make me less reliant on others' fairness and more self-reliant in my success? Finally, let's address another critical shift. Strategic thinking is far more powerful than moral outrage. When confronted with unfairness, your first instinct may be to feel indignation. You burn with anger at the injustice. You want to expose the wrongdoer, punish them, or demand recognition. These feelings are natural, but they rarely improve your position. Outrage focuses on how others should behave. Strategy focuses on how you can adapt. Outrage demands others change. Strategy ensures you change in ways that strengthen your long-term position. Moral outrage may feel satisfying in the moment, but it blinds you to bigger opportunities. It can push you into rash confrontations that damage relationships or reputations. Strategic thinking, however, asks, what outcome serves me best, not just today, but in the months and years ahead? Sometimes direct confrontation is wise. Other times, silence and repositioning is smarter. Sometimes documenting patterns quietly is better than explosive exposure. Strategic thinking doesn't abandon values. It aligns tactics with long-term objectives. Machiavelli wrote, everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you truly are. Outrage shows the world your raw emotions. Strategy shows the world your chosen appearance, crafted to serve your goals. Outrage reacts to what is unfair. Strategy acts based on what is effective. Consider the workplace again. A colleague steals credit for your project. Outrage pushes you to confront them publicly, satisfying in the moment, but risky to your reputation. Strategy pushes you to ensure your contributions are documented, to cultivate allies who recognize your work, and to make your role undeniable. One response vents emotion, the other prevents recurrence. Which one truly serves you? Strategic thinkers see beyond single events. They study patterns, incentives, and systems. They ask, is this unfair moment part of a larger dynamic? What pressures or motivations are shaping this behavior? How can I change the system so it doesn't harm me again? Outrage stops at anger. Strategy moves toward power. So remember this. Complaints reveal weakness, entitlement breeds dependency, and outrage clouds judgment. But strategic response, competence, and long-term thinking build real, unshakable strength. Fairness is not guaranteed, but capability can be. You don't need to wait for justice to be delivered. You can create outcomes through intelligence, skill, and strategy. Stop being weakened by unfairness. Start being strengthened by it. Power rarely operates on fairness. It thrives on perception, influence, and positioning. To navigate this reality effectively, you must learn to read the underlying forces shaping decisions. Instead of reacting with frustration when things feel unjust, ask yourself, who truly holds the authority here? What incentives drive their actions? How do they prefer to receive information? What persuasion styles might open doors rather than close them? Understanding these subtle dynamics gives you a much greater advantage than leaning on moral appeals that assume others care about justice as much as you do. Strategic thinking is not a gift bestowed on a chosen few. It is a skill that develops through deliberate practice. Every time you pause before reacting emotionally and instead analyze the situation logically, you strengthen your ability to think several moves ahead. With time, this process becomes second nature. Your instinct shifts from impulsive outrage to calculated assessment. But wisdom also requires discernment. There will be moments when moral clarity demands an immediate response, when silence or delay would mean complicity in serious wrongdoing. The challenge lies in distinguishing those rare moments from the far more common ones where a strategic pause is not weakness, but wisdom. When life presents you with unfair treatment, the first step is not action, but containment. Process your emotions privately, write them out, vent to yourself, or reflect quietly before bringing your response into the open. Once that emotional surge is managed, examine the situation like a strategist. What caused this imbalance? What incentives are at play for the other parties involved? What approach would not only address this instance, but also reduce the chances of repetition in the future? And most importantly, what path of response allows you to stay aligned with your values while also strengthening your long term position? This dual focus, principle plus effectiveness, is the hallmark of true strength. Moral outrage looks outward, demanding that the world conform to what should be. Strategic thinking looks inward and forward, asking how to navigate what is to create better outcomes. Both approaches have their place, but history shows that those who rely primarily on strategy achieve more consistent, long term victories. Defining your own standards of success. One of the most liberating shifts you can make is moving away from depending on others to tell you when you succeeded. As long as your sense of achievement is tied to external applause, titles, rewards, promotions, or recognition, you remain hostage to forces you cannot control. A biased manager, a flawed system, or sheer bad timing can strip you of validation despite your effort and results. By contrast, when you create internal benchmarks, you reclaim control over your motivation and direction. Internal standards are rooted in self assessment, the progress you've made, the skills you've sharpened, the problems you've solved, and the personal goals you've moved closer to achieving. These are measures no one can take away from you. They allow you to stay driven even when external recognition is absent or delayed. This doesn't mean rejecting external feedback altogether. Wise individuals remain open to outside perspectives and market realities. It simply means you no longer rely on them as the foundation of your self worth. Machiavelli warned that those who depend on luck or the favor of others build on shifting sand. By defining your own scorecard, you become the master of your own path, less swayed by others' biases or moods. The internal standards worth adopting are always those within your control. The effort you commit, the discipline you maintain, the skills you deliberately cultivate, the value you generate, and the milestones you choose for yourself. Clarity here matters. Ask yourself, what is my long-term purpose? What values do I refuse to compromise on? What capabilities will serve me regardless of who recognizes them? With these anchors, you can build a system of personal metrics that provide steady motivation even in hostile or indifferent environments. The psychological effect is profound. Instead of riding the roller coaster of praise and criticism, you begin to operate from a place of stability. Emotional balance improves your decision making, and steady motivation fuels consistent progress. You also accelerate your learning cycle because you no longer wait for others to give you feedback. You evaluate your own performance and adapt faster. In many cases, internal standards are even higher than external ones. When you commit to your own definition of excellence, you often push yourself harder than others ever would. This builds not just competence, but confidence. Each milestone you reach on your own terms becomes undeniable evidence of your capability, reinforcing your self trust and reducing your dependence on outside validation. From a strategic standpoint, this independence opens new doors. When you are not desperate for recognition, you can take risks others avoid, pursue unconventional opportunities, and invest in long term growth without needing immediate applause. Ironically, this often leads to the external recognition you no longer chase, because those who build value steadily eventually attract attention they never had to beg for. Creating internal standards is not a one time event, but a lifelong process. Begin by defining what success means to you beyond others' approval. Break those aims into clear, measurable steps. Review your progress regularly, celebrate internal wins, and refine your standards as you grow. Over time, you'll notice yourself becoming less shaken by unfair treatment and more anchored in your own compass. The key takeaway: external recognition is fickle. Internal standards create unshakable independence. Beyond fairness, building real strength. Throughout this exploration, one truth has emerged again and again. Leaning on fairness makes you fragile, while developing capability makes you strong. When your sense of progress depends on how fairly others treat you, you remain vulnerable to their whims. But when your focus shifts to competence, value creation, and strategic response, you free yourself from that trap. Fairness feels comforting as an idea, but in practice, it often leads to disappointment and manipulation. Those who cling to it invite frustration when reality doesn't match their expectations. Worse, they become easy targets for people who understand that fairness is not the primary currency of power. Machiavelli emphasized that human beings act according to interest and necessity far more than abstract ideals. By seeing people as they are rather than how you wish they were, you gain a clearer map of the terrain you're navigating. Complaining about unfairness achieves the opposite of what you want. It advertises weakness to others, encouraging them to exploit rather than respect you. Internally, it reinforces a narrative of victimhood, wiring your brain to look for blame instead of solutions. Strategic response, on the other hand, projects resilience and earns respect. It shifts your focus from powerless outrage to actionable advantage. Power rooted in competence outlasts power rooted in entitlement. Anyone can demand recognition, but only those who consistently deliver value become indispensable. When you can solve problems others cannot, create results others rely on, and adapt regardless of conditions, you build real leverage. That kind of strength commands respect, whether or not others are inclined to treat you fairly. Strategic thinking amplifies this effect. Outrage may provide emotional satisfaction in the moment, but it rarely changes outcomes. Strategic analysis, understanding patterns, motivations, and consequences, creates responses that improve both immediate results and long-term positioning. Finally, defining success internally ensures your progress never stalls because of someone else's blindness or bias. When you measure achievement by your own standards, you keep moving forward regardless of who notices. Over time, this independence not only builds resilience, but also positions you as someone who doesn't just wait for permission. You create impact regardless of conditions, putting it all into practice. These principles only become powerful when applied. Begin with small steps. Next time you encounter unfair treatment, resist the urge to complain. Instead, ask, what does this teach me? What skill would make me less vulnerable in this situation? How can I use this to improve my position? When you feel your motivation sag because recognition didn't come, remind yourself of your internal benchmarks. Evaluate your progress by your own standards and celebrate what you've achieved. Replace expectations of fairness with commitments to capability. Each day, focus on developing skills, knowledge, and resilience that no one can take away from you. This mindset shift can feel uncomfortable at first because it places responsibility squarely on your shoulders. But it also hands you the keys to true independence. You no longer wait for others to grant you success. You create it. The transformation is clear. Instead of being someone who pleads for fairness, you become someone who commands respect through competence, composure, and clarity. Others may or may not treat you fairly, but it no longer determines your destiny. True strength lies not in expecting justice from the world, but in becoming capable enough to thrive regardless of how the world behaves. If this resonates with you, declare it clearly. I choose strength over dependence. I choose strategy over outrage. I choose competence over entitlement. And I choose to define my success by my own standards, not by the fairness of others. This commitment marks the turning point from vulnerability to power. From now on, your path is not shaped by whether others play fair. It is shaped by the strength you build. the strategies you employ, and the value you create. And that strength, once developed, cannot be taken away.